Wally blast into adventure. On Earth, a robot named Wally gathered trash. It was the 29th century, and the humans had left behind a lot of trash. Now they were up in space aboard a giant space liner called the Axiom. Robots like Wally had been left on Earth to clean up the mess, but now Wally was the only bot left. Suddenly, a spaceship touched down. A sleek, white robot named Evie got off. She had been sent from the Axiom to see if enough trash had been cleared so that humans could live on Earth again. Wally was curious about Eve. She was very serious. Wally showed her all the things he'd found while cleaning up the trash, such as a light bulb and a broken clock. He even danced with a garbage can lid and made her giggle. Then Wally showed her a plant he had found. Eve took it and shut down at once. Wally did his best to care for his new friend, but it was no use. She wouldn't respond. Then the spaceship returned for Eve. Wally hid and went into space with her. Aboard the Axiom, the plant had somehow disappeared. The captain ordered Eve to go to the repair ward. He spotted Wally and sent him to be cleaned. Wally watched as the robots started to repair Eve and looked as if they were hurting her. Wally crashed into the repair room and rescued her. And the other robots in the repair ward, who were called reject bots, they were all grateful to Wally, but nobody else on the Axiom was happy. They wanted to punish Wally and Eve. The steward bots caught up with them, but the reject bots helped their two friends get away. Eve decided that the safest place for Wally was back on Earth, so she led him to an escape pod, but Wally didn't want to leave Eve behind. As Eve tried to convince Wally to get inside, they heard somebody coming and hid. It was Gopher, the captain's assistant bot. He had the missing plant. He put it in the escape pod and set the pod to launch, and then self-destruct. He didn't want the plant to live. He sounds like a meanie. Gopher exited the pod and pressed the launch button. Wally hurried aboard to try to get the plant back, but he wasn't fast enough. The pod launched with Wally inside. Pod will self-destruct in 10 seconds, said a computer voice. Wally pressed all kinds of buttons trying to escape. At the same time, Eve was rocketing towards the pod, hoping to catch up to Wally. But she was still so far behind. When kaboom, the pod exploded. A moment later, Wally blasted towards Eve using a fire extinguisher from the escape pod. Eve was pleased to see Wally, and the plant safe and sound. She leaned toward him, and a spark passed between their hands. Wally was thrilled as the two danced dreamily in space. Back on the Axiom, Eve told Wally to stay hidden while she brought the plant to the captain. The captain was excited. If a plant could grow on Earth, then it was time for people to return. The captain gave the order to turn the ship's hollow detector. It would identify the plant. If the plant was from Earth, the Axiom would go there. Otto, the autopilot, refused. He was following orders from the head of By and Large, B&L, the superstore back on Earth that had built the Axiom centuries earlier. The people at B&L had told everyone they could clean up all of the trash on Earth, but B&L had broken their promise. The work had proved to be too much. They had abandoned Earth and sent their secret orders to the Axiom autopilot never to return to the planet. It had been Otto who had made the plant disappear earlier. He had told Gopher to launch it into space so that the captain wouldn't ask any more questions. Now Gopher tossed the plant down a garbage chute, but Wally, who had been climbing up the chute to find Eve, saved the plant once again. When Otto saw what had happened, he zapped Wally and turned off Eve. They both went down the garbage chute. After sitting in his hover chair for years and having robots do everything for him, the captain was too weak to stop Otto. The robot had complete control of the ship. Down in the garbage bay, Wally was in bad shape. He needed some spare parts. Eve knew where to find them, back on Earth in his trailer. Wally had helped her. Now it was her turn to help him. Using her blaster arm to fire, she made a hole in the ceiling. She had to get the plant to the hollow detector and bring the Axiom back to Earth. Wally and Eve dodged the stewards with more help from reject bots, while the captain struggled with Otto for control of the bridge. "Eve, Wally," the captain said in a shipwide announcement, "bring the plant to the Lido deck. I'll have activated the hollow detector." Sure enough, when Wally and Eve got there, the hollow detector was activated. But then Otto overpowered the captain again, and the hollow detector began to sink back into the floor. A very weak Wally jammed himself under the hollow detector to hold it up. Meanwhile, on the bridge, the captain was gathering all his strength. He couldn't remember ever getting out of his hover chair. But he had to try. Like a baby taking his first steps, he stood up, walked over to Otto, and turned him off. The Axiom passengers saw it all on their hollow screens and cheered. Eve got the plant to the hollow detector. "Plant origin verified," said a computer voice. "Set course for Earth." The Axiom hyperjumped back to Earth, in no time flat. But Eve didn't know if she could save Wally. She flew him to his trailer and replaced his damaged parts. Then she blasted a hole in the trailer roof, recharging his battery with sunlight. Wally powered up, but he didn't seem himself. He didn't recognize Eve, or he didn't care. All he cared about was trash. Scooping trash, compacting trash, stacking trash. It was as if he had forgotten about his adventures with Eve. Eve called his name, grasped his hand, and tried to snap him out of it, but nothing worked. As if saying a last goodbye, Eve leaned towards him. A spark passed between their heads, as it had once before. Then Eve turned to go. But Wally didn't let go. He was still holding Eve's hand. She turned to look at Wally and saw his eyes light up. His hand was clasped around hers. "Eva," he said. "Wally!" Eve cried. Meanwhile, near the ship, the captain was planting the small plant that had led them all back to Earth. The captain, the passengers of the Axiom, and all the robots that had a lot of work ahead of them. It wasn't going to be easy to finish the job of cleaning up the planet, but now Wally wouldn't be doing it alone. With Eve at his side, Wally knew he would never feel lonely again. The end.